The sound of laughter can be a weapon, and in a penthouse high above Chicago, a room full of the city's wealthiest and whitest elites was about to use it to destroy a woman they thought was beneath them. They didn't know they were signing their own ruin. This is the story of Alani Washington. To the world, she was just a 31-year-old woman in a simple white dress, arriving alone at a charity gala. But that was the disguise. The truth was that Alani was the founder and CEO of Apex Stratos, a $62 billion global conglomerate. She owned more of Chicago's skyline than anyone in that room, including the very building the party was in. Her hobby wasn't shopping or socializing. It was acquiring failing companies and turning them into empires. And her net worth made the hosts of this party look like they were playing with monopoly money. Before we unveil how their cruelty shattered their entire world, if you love a story where the underdog holds all the power, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss a moment of this justice. The hosts were the Vancrafts, Arthur, Eleanor, and their two entitled children, Blair and Charles, a name that whispered old money, legacy, and pure, unadulterated prejudice. They were American royalty, or so they thought. The truth was a secret known only to their most trusted accountants and one other person. The Vancraft empire was a ghost, hollowed out by debt and bad investments, secretly surviving on a single, desperate hope: a $2.5 billion merger with the mighty Apex Stratos. They thought their savior was some faceless, nameless CEO they'd never met. They never imagined their savior was the black woman they were about to humiliate. It started at the door, with a sneer from the security guard they'd instructed. It continued with whispers as she walked through the crowd. Who invited the help? She must be lost. The air was thick with their condescension, but the real blow was coming. It was Blair Vancraft, with a vicious glint in her eye, who accidentally stuck out her foot. Alani stumbled, a glass of blood-red Merlot flying, staining her pristine white dress. The room froze for a second, then erupted in cruel, mocking laughter. Phones came out, capturing her humiliation for social media. They were laughing at the woman who held their entire future in her hands. And in that moment, as she stood there, drenched in wine and their hatred, Alani Washington made a decision. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply looked at Blair, then at the rest of the family, with a calm that was more terrifying than any anger. The $2.5 billion lifeline they were begging for. She was about to snap it in two. How does one destroy a century-old dynasty? What happens when the person you mocked has the power to erase you from existence? The answer is coming, and the fallout will be absolutely catastrophic. If you believe that respect is priceless and revenge should be swift, share this video and let us know in the comments who you think deserved what was coming. Subscribe for more stories of ultimate justice. The Vancraft family didn't just live in Chicago. They believed they owned its very soul. For over a century, their name was synonymous with old money prestige, a legacy built on steel and railroads and preserved in the cold marble halls of their ancestral estate. They were American royalty, and they never, ever let you forget it. At the head of this crumbling dynasty was Arthur Vancraft, a man in his late 60s whose face was a roadmap of arrogance and anxiety. His entire world, his family's entire future, hinged on one thing: securing a massive merger with the global powerhouse, Apex Stratos. This deal wasn't just business. It was a $2.5 billion lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Unknown to most of high society, the Vancraft fortune was a beautifully wrapped empty box. Their wealth was all facade, propped up by debt and the fading glow of a name. His wife, Eleanor Vancraft, was the sharp-tongued architect of their social standing. She curated their parties, their guest lists, and their illusions with the precision of a surgeon. Her hobby was collecting art and insults, both delivered with a chilling smile. Then there were their children, the heirs to a hollow throne. Blair, the daughter, was her mother's protégé in cruelty, believing her family name was a weapon to be used against anyone she deemed beneath her. Her brother Charles was a picture of lazy entitlement, more concerned with his vintage car collection than the fact that the funds to maintain it were rapidly vanishing. Their world was a gilded cage of their own making, perched high above the city in a penthouse that overlooked the very skyline Alani Washington owned. And on the night of their most important charity gala, they were about to make the most catastrophic mistake of their lives. They were so focused on impressing the anonymous, unseen CEO of Apex Stratos that they failed to see the real power standing right in front of them. To truly understand the depth of their downfall, you must understand the woman they underestimated. Before we see their world ignite, if you're ready for a story where karma arrives not with a whisper, but with a seismic shock, hit like and subscribe now. Alani Washington was not just a guest. She was a force of nature, the founder and CEO of Apex Stratos. She had built a $62 billion empire from the ground up, a self-made titan who preferred the shadows to the spotlight. While the Vancrafts spent their wealth, she built legacies. She was a quiet storm of intellect and resolve, a woman who remembered every slight, not for revenge, but as a lesson in human nature. And the Vancrafts were about to become her most powerful lesson yet. The stage was set, a room full of wolves, dressed in silk and self-importance, circling the one person they thought was a sheep. They were ready to mock, to humiliate, and to assert their dominance. But they had no idea they were taunting the hunter. The tension is a live wire in the air. Can you feel it? The moment before everything shatters, the moment Alani stepped into the Vancrafts' penthouse, the air shifted. It wasn't a welcome. It was a silent, collective judgment. She felt the stares, like shards of ice, from the old money elite who circled her with polite, predatory smiles. The first cut came from Eleanor Vancraft herself. Gliding over, she didn't offer a greeting. Instead, she looked Alani up and down, her eyes lingering on the simple, elegant white dress. "How brave of you to wear something so accessible," Eleanor said, her voice a sweetened dagger. The surrounding circle of guests tittered with nervous, complicit laughter. Alani simply smiled, a calm, unreadable mask settling over her face. But beneath the surface, a quiet resolve began to crystallize. The injustice escalated with Blair Vancraft. "Let me help you find your place," Blair chirped, leading Alani away from the main gathering. But she didn't lead her to a seat among the guests. She guided her toward a small, isolated table near the kitchen entrance, where the staff was bustling in and out. "Here you go," Blair said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This is much more suitable." The message was clear. They saw her as the help. They believed her presence was a mistake, an uninvited intrusion into their pristine world. And then came the final, unforgivable act of cruelty. As Alani turned, Blair Vancraft, with a smirk she didn't bother to hide, deliberately stuck out her foot. Time seemed to slow. Alani stumbled, her balance lost. A glass of deep blood-red wine flew from her hand, arcing through the air before crashing against her chest. The dark liquid exploding across the pristine white fabric of her dress. A gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a wave of stifled, mocking laughter. Phones were raised, capturing her humiliation for the world to see. They were documenting their own demise, and they didn't even know it. Alani stood frozen for a moment, the cold, wet stain spreading across her dress, the sound of their ridicule echoing in her ears. This was more than a spilled drink. It was a public execution of her dignity. But she did not cry. She did not shout. She simply lifted her head, her eyes meeting Blair's triumphant gaze. And in that moment, the calm on Alani's face was more terrifying than any scream of rage could ever be. The Vancrafts had just thrown a match on their own $2.5 billion lifeline, and they were about to watch it burn. The laughter died in their throats. The silence that fell was heavier, more profound than the noise that had preceded it. All eyes were fixed on Alani, waiting for the tears, the stammered apologies, and the frantic retreat of a humiliated woman. It never came. Instead, Alani Washington reached into the small clutch bag she carried. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and utterly calm. The only sound was the gentle click of the clasp. She pulled out not a tissue to dab the stain, but her phone. Its sleek, black screen reflected the bewildered faces of the crowd. With a few quiet taps, she opened a secure app, her expression one of detached professional focus, as if she were finalizing a routine business transaction. She selected a contact, typed a single devastating line of instruction, and hit send. The entire process took less than 10 seconds. Then, she lifted her gaze, her eyes locking not on Blair, but on Arthur Vancraft. The patriarch's face was a confused scowl, annoyed at the disruption to his perfect evening. "Mr. Vancraft," Alani's voice cut through the silence, clear and resonant, devoid of any emotion. "You have spent the last 6 months begging my company, Apex Stratos, for a merger. You've sent dozens of emails and left countless voicemails for my office, all pleading for that $2.5 billion lifeline to save your bankrupt family business." A wave of confused murmurs swept the room. Arthur's face went from confused to ashen. How could she know that? Alani took a single step forward, the wine-stained dress a badge of their shame, not hers. "You wanted to meet the CEO of Apex Stratos. You wanted to look your savior in the eye." She paused, letting the horrific dawning realization hit every single person in the room. "Well, Arthur, now you have." The air was sucked out of the penthouse. Arthur Vancraft looked as if he'd been shot. Eleanor clutched her pearls, her mouth agape. Blair's triumphant smirk had melted into a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. "The merger is cancelled," Alani stated, her words falling like a judge's gavel. "Every contract, every discussion, every single hope you pinned on my company is now null and void. Consider your lifeline severed." And in that moment, as the Vancraft family's world collapsed into absolute ruin around them, Alani Washington stood perfectly still. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply let the devastating weight of their own prejudice and cruelty crush them, proving that the most powerful revenge is not screamed, but silently, irrevocably delivered. The fallout was as swift as it was absolute. Within hours of Alani Washington leaving the penthouse, the news wires were buzzing. Vancraft empire collapses after Apex Stratos deal implodes. Bankruptcy looms for Chicago dynasty. The $2.5 billion was not just a number on a contract. It was the foundation holding up their entire world. And Alani had pulled it out with the calm of a master architect. The social media videos that were meant to mock her became the very evidence of their bigotry, going viral and turning public opinion into a weapon that finished what the financial ruin had started. The Vancrafts lost everything. Their penthouse, their company, their social standing, all of it evaporated. They became ghosts in their own city, a cautionary tale whispered about at parties they were no longer invited to. The red wine on Alani's dress was a temporary stain, but the mark of their humiliation was permanent. But Alani's story didn't end with revenge. It began with legacy. The $2.5 billion that was meant to prop up a prejudiced dynasty was redirected. She established the Grandma Rose Fund, named for the grandmother who taught her that true strength is in lifting others as you climb. The fund was dedicated to empowering minority entrepreneurs, providing the opportunities that she had fought for. It was a seismic shift of capital, from upholding old broken systems to building new equitable ones. So what is the wisdom? What is the lesson that echoes in the silent ruin of the Vancraft penthouse and the vibrant hope of the Grandma Rose Fund? It's a simple, powerful truth that every American understands in their bones. Character is your real currency, and respect is a debt you must always pay. No amount of generational wealth, no famous name, can protect you from the cost of your own cruelty. The Vancrafts thought their money made them untouchable, but they forgot that in the real world, dignity is priceless, and integrity is the only fortune that truly lasts. Alani Washington proved that the highest form of success isn't just about building an empire. It's about using that power to ensure that justice is more than just a word. It's an action. She took their moment of hate and transformed it into a lasting legacy of hope. So, we leave you with this question to ponder in the comments. In a world that often judges by surfaces, when have you witnessed that true power isn't about where you come from, but the integrity with which you move forward? If this story of justice and legacy resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more tales that remind us of the power of character. And let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Alani's shoes?